In today's episode of Spiraling Up, our team discusses the rise of fractional executives in professional services, and then we're going to speak with fractional COO All-Star Jen Hamilton about all things happening in operations. This is a really insightful episode. Welcome, everyone. This is Spiraling Up with Hinge Marketing. All right, welcome back to another episode of Spiraling Up. My name is Austin, and I am joined by my co-hosts, Mary-Blanche Kramer and Joe Pope. Mary-Blanche, Joe, how are you guys doing today?
Doing good.
Yeah, man, doing good. Excited to get going and have some conversations about, the fractional world that we're living in.
That's right. I want to give a quick shout out to our listeners. We've had a lot of great feedback on the podcast recently. If you're listening again to this episode, please leave a like, subscribe, comment, send us some feedback. Guys, I'm very excited because we're going to be very focused in this episode. It's not often that, in every episode we kind of dive into one topic, but today we really are. We're kind of focusing more on this, area of fractional executives, on-demand work. How has it crept into your life recently? How has it been more, why did we bring this to the table?
You're all things AI. I saw your post you put up yesterday, Austin, right? You were talking about, and I think we can probably get into it in another pivotal story, but I embraced AI in a fractional manner that I felt was relevant to folks. Did you know that you can basically use your phone now as like a FaceTime with like a Gemini or ChatGPT and talk to it as you try to do a various thing? For me, it was cooking, of which I am not good at. And I had an AI companion be my fractional sous chef. Sous chef. Is that how you say that?
Sous chef, yeah. So it told you kind of what to do, like here's the next step in your meal, or?
Exactly. It was a running dialogue for like 35, 40 minutes of us just talking back and forth. I was trying to use cast iron because, fancy.
Mm-hmm.
And well, you can screw that up real quick. So, I was asking how to season, how to prep. I was cooking some like onions and pepper and mushroom medley to put on top of a steak because, of course, steak. I thought that this was just so interesting. It's that type of insight to be at my fingertips and to basically allow me to make something that was edible was that's my fractional story of the week.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I'm going to have to try that. So, could you down to saying, how should I season said steak? And it would
exactly
say XYZ 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. The transcript of this would have been super insightful. It was like the most polite response to my stupid rambling about various things. It'd be like, of course, Joe, that sounds like a great idea. You should definitely consider this though. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Also pumps you up while you're.
Yeah, right. It was like a motivational sous chef.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, when I think of fractional things that I use, Instacart is what comes to mind. I would not make it a week without Instacart. I Instacart everything, and it saves me so much time because I do not like going aisle by aisle through the grocery store.
What is Instacart? I actually am not joking. I have no idea what Instacart is.
Stop. You don't know what Instacart is?
I don't.
You're kidding, right?
What?
Whatever Instacart is, they don't have it where I live.
They don't have it.
I don't know what it is.
That's fair. It's basically an app where you can pick a grocery store close to you. You pick out everything that you want from that grocery store, and then someone goes and shops for you, picks it up, and brings it to your house. It's
like Uber for groceries.
Pretty much.
Exactly right. Yep. Except for if you have a Chase Visa card, they give you a credit every month. So I went the Instacart route. But yeah, I guess Instacart, Southern Brazil, they have not yet expanded their territory down there.
It has not made it here yet, no.
So what's anything fractional from your perspective then, Austin?
Joe, I relate to what you were saying, like, in terms of how you're interacting with Gemini and AI. I think just in general, and you guys know that I'm like bursting at the seams to like
addicted.
Talk more about some of the AI stuff. Future pivotal story for next week. But yeah, I think, while it won't be like meant necessarily a fractional executive or the value you get from a human being kind of being brought into the loop with all their experience, I think that, the way that people are using these large language models is very similar to kind of like, fractional support, fractional work.
Yeah. On demand.
Even preparing for this podcast, we now heavily use tools like Gemini and ChatGPT to kind of speed up the process, right? For ideation and for brainstorming and for summarizing intros and stuff like that. So things that just a couple of years ago, like that, those tools, it didn't exist, and now we have them. So yeah, there's the technology aspect to it, but then there's also the humans in the loop, and I think that's what I'm most excited to talk about. And actually, I think that lends itself well to a transition here to our pivotal story this week. MB, do you want to go ahead and introduce this week's pivotal story?
Yeah, all right, let's do it. So welcome back to another pivotal story. Today is all about the rise of fractional executives gaining traction in the business world. And we recently saw an article on Reworked that really took a deep dive here. And it got us wondering how our clients and even our own agency could be tapping into this model. Now, for a long time, the standard C-suite model has been pretty set in stone. So why now? Why are more companies starting to bring in these fractional executives? Well, the article laid out some pretty compelling reasons, and it's everything from needing to cut costs in uncertain times to filling specific gaps during periods of rapid growth or change. So, Joe, I want to kick it to you first today. Tell us, have you seen companies you work with embracing this fractional executive model? And what do you think are the biggest benefits or challenges of bringing on leadership in this way?
I mean, you absolutely are seeing it, and we're going to have one of them come on in terms of a specialist in this, Jen, a little later in this episode. But I think the biggest thing that stands out to me in this world now, where you have access to expertise in a part-time manner, is the effectiveness for organizations that wouldn't have had that access previously. I mean, especially your small to mid-sized groups, you had to rely on hopefully making a really good hire, or you had to rely on having a budget to afford a McKinsey or somebody like that, right, who brings in a consulting type service. But there is an alternative now, much like I have an alternative sous chef. I used to have to pull open a big book, and that relies on my ability to read and keep my eyes on one thing while trying not to burn something else. And I mean, you could think about it from the perspective of these, we'll say, smaller businesses now who are going through a period of growth, or maybe bringing on a rebranding type initiative, and they're not quite ready to make that jump to the higher price consultancy type group. And this provides a really interesting alternative across all major areas of the C-suite, from the executive to operations, marketing and growth, business development, things along those lines as well.
Yeah, all solid points. Austin, what's your take?
Well, for me, you guys know I like to turn to the Hinge research to see, like, is there anything that we can glean from our research and how it applies to the trends that we talk about. And actually, there is in this case. So one thing that we've seen, this is something we've seen for probably 5 or 6 years running in the study, since we've studied, kind of incorporated it into our high growth study, is that faster growing companies are more likely to outsource than slower growing companies. And I think we can break that down. So, I think from the perspective of our high growth study, we're thinking a lot about marketing. So a lot of the stuff on the list includes like video, graphic design, website management, SEO. But there are some things on the list like strategy, which, if you think about outsourcing strategy, what would that look like? Well, it would look like bringing in some kind of executive to help, some executive level thinking to help kind of set the table, either during like a season of transition or a season of growth, like those things you mentioned, MB. And even there, we're seeing that high growth firms are leveraging those outside resources for things like strategy, more of those executive level things. So, I mean, my takeaway is that, I think this seems like something that is totally on the table, and especially in lines of what we see from our high growth data.
It's interesting. I mean, we've talked about some of these big benefits. There are a few things that come to mind, though. Anytime you think about bringing somebody kind of from the cold, if you will, they may have all this experience. They've worked with a variety of different industries, maybe, or sizes of organizations. And that's all great because that person can bring that insight to your team. But Another thing that comes to mind on the negative side, though, is this whole cultural integration, right? The idea of you're bringing this expert in and they're expected to kind of hit the ground running and be ready to roll. But, organizations have their own behaviors, and these groups could run into some challenges, especially if the executive who you're bringing in to shake things up proceeds to shake things up. So I do think that there are some important elements here in terms of like how you vet out who your resource is, making sure it's not going to be something that is going to bring your functions to a screeching halt, but not able to restart as a part of this new era, if you will.
Well, I can think of no better way of continuing this conversation than to talk with our guest, Jen Hamilton. She's a fractional COO. She is, like I mentioned before, just a wealth of insight. And I'm really excited to kind of dig in and kind of put her to the test a little bit to hear, what kind of things as a fractional COO does she kind of rank in terms of importance. So why don't we turn to that segment now for our next segment in Spiraling Up. Well, we know that operations leaders are often the unsung heroes of the business world. If they're successful, most people won't notice. And if they mess up, everybody knows it. So it takes a special kind of person to love that kind of role and to make it work. This is why today we're so excited to be joined by our guest, Jen Hamilton. Jen is a fractional COO and a mentor to other COOs out there in the professional services space. Jen, welcome to Spiraling Up.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. It's going to be fun.
Jen, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and it was really striking to me that when I went to your bio section, you actually led off with a story. It's this kind of like a family story. Would you mind sharing like this passion that you have for helping businesses kind of grow and thrive?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm sure I'm not the only one who doesn't always understand your origin story of what pulls you and calls you to your work. And I started to put the pieces together, and I realized why have I always wanted to work with small businesses to do good in the world? Like those who are like out there to really help someone. And it started back when I was a teenager and even somewhat before that. So my grandparents owned a small hardware store in town where I grew up. My entire family worked there, including myself, my sister, and my cousins when we were super young. It was my first job when I was 9. I was counting like washers and screws and things for inventory. And I thought it was the best thing ever because I got paid $2 an hour and like hot chocolate. I'm like, this is great. And it made me probably started an addiction to work. I just love working. But it was fast forward in when I was about, I think 13 or 14, when Home Depot came into town, and it seemed like overnight this hardware store was gone. And it wasn't just the store was gone, like my entire family was out of work. And just what does that look like? What are we doing? That kind of thing. And the thing that really struck me though is like having a kid version of looking at business saying, why did the good people lose?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it they are so well loved by their customers? They put their heart and soul into it. And why didn't they make it? And it was because they didn't have the business acumen. And so it put me on the trajectory to be able to say, okay, how can I go save others? And it was interesting because the side note to that story is this company still exists, but it morphed. It morphed from a hardware store into real estate investment because they had 2 superheroes come in, an accountant and a lawyer, to save the day. To basically tell them, you have an asset. You are on some incredible land. Let's make this a family legacy. And it's a business that I will be inheriting. It still exists. And my mom and her brother still say we have no idea how to do business. We know hardware, but they are smart enough to surround themselves with folks in the professional service world who do know what they're doing. And it's part of why this has always been my story. I've always envisioned myself, it seems so silly, but now I have it on my website, where I feel like I'm in a suit and wearing a cape, basically. That superhero to save the day. And it's how I see, I'm probably one of the only people who see accountants and lawyers as superheroes, but I do.
We have plenty of accountant and lawyer clients who love the idea of being considered superheroes. So I think that nobody would mind that. And Jen, your story really resonated with me. My best friend growing up's family owned a hardware store. So when we saw that on your website, it really I was one of the guys. I didn't get paid. I mostly just sat there and hung out in the basement. But I also moved washers around and listen to the old guys talk and so forth. So it's a great story, Jen. I really appreciate you sharing it with everyone here.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, you've gathered all this experience now in your long career in professional services and particularly in this space of operations, right? And so we're really excited to play a game with you today because operations, I mean, this spans so many categories and it was really hard for our team to choose just like one area to dive into today. So we narrowed it down to 3. So we're going to talk today about client experience, company culture, and business intelligence. So, Jen, the game that we would like to play is blind rankings. And here's how it will work. We're going to play 3 rounds, each focused on one of those critical areas that I mentioned that I think COOs at any professional services firms, they're going to have their hands in some degree. And what we'd like to do for each round is present you with a series of 7 items, one by one, and have you rank them in terms of importance. The catch is, of course, you're not going to know what's coming next. So that's the challenge. You'll get to rank them as we go, describing your reasoning. But at the end, we'll take a look at the list, and I don't know, maybe you'll be like, "Oh, I got it all. I want to I want to change it all." And that's all. That's the whole fun bit. So, any questions for us as we go into the game?
No, I'm going to coin a phrase that my friend said recently. I'm scare-sighted, scared and excited.
I love that.
Cool. Well, let's dive in. Okay, so Jen, round 1, our first category is client experience. Jen, before we dive into the options and get your rankings, tell us about client experience when you're working as a fractional COO or working with some of the people you mentor. Client experience, like going into this category, what are already some of the things you're thinking about?
One of the things I think about with client experience is that most firms are wrapped around this. And from an operational point of view, you should be. These are the people that pay your bills. But the other thing too is how can we make sure that they have not just an experience, I like to say that they have a wow experience, a way to just be so impressed that they refer people. So this is, to me, like the whole business wraps around how great the client experience is because it will keep you in business, not just because they pay your bills, but help you continue to build a reputation. So part of why I think, going back to the whole hardware thing, I learned this by witnessing how incredibly gifted my family was and put their heart and soul into their clients. And to see that wasn't the reason they went away, but but it was the reason they stuck around for as long as they did do before a large company came in and out expensed them essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into it because we've got 7 items here. I think it's going to be tough to prioritize them, but you're the expert. So let's start out with the first one: proactive project management and communication.
So this whole game is going to be like picking my favorite kid. They're all going to be hard. Proactive. I love proactive. Let's go with 3.
3, proactive project management and communication.
Okay. I'm already afraid. What's the next one?
All right, number 2 here: regularly scheduled client feedback surveys. So maybe like NPS or CSAT.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love the feedback. Okay, I want to leave space for some other things. So let's go with 5th.
How often, when you think about talking about regularly scheduled, what comes to mind there? Right?
Yeah.
Are we every year, every other year? Is it monthly? Is it, what does that typically look like, Jim, when you bring that type of suggestion to a team?
It's a great question because, as you all know, with marketing, this is a really powerful way that you can share your story very, very quickly by understanding what it is that people would do to, especially NPS, to be able to recommend others. And the thing that I see is that people get the regularly scheduled is the part that I love about it,
Yeah.
and what they miss about it is that putting a system around it to cause it to happen. Of course, I'm going to say that as an operations person. I would like someone to be touched, if you will, asked once a year, but it
Okay.
doesn't. I
Yeah.
think we're at least because we don't want to overdo it. But you can also wrap in a testimonial kind of experience with it. You can also wrap in a referral type experience. So you can really put some good systems around it, because having that survey results can, basically trigger some other good activities. But you don't, the thing that people mess up too is like they do it all at the same time. You could actually, spread it out amongst different clients so that the trigger, if you will, is off of maybe their start date or something like that, instead of like, okay, we have to do it on November 1st or whatever.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you ever do it like deliverable based. So like when you finish a big project or a big engagement, if you ever tie it to maybe not necessarily like a time metric, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example. You can also systematize it around a trigger event. It could be not just the end of the engagement, where I think a lot of people do it, but where you can really get fancy, and you would have to work with your client service team, but it's very powerful. If you look at your overall engagement and you think of like, where are some moments of the engagement where they're really having a high, and definitely not ask when they're having a low. I mean, there are times we make our clients very, very happy and very, very upset. It's just part of the process, right? Because we're advisors, we're telling them sometimes bad news, but then we also win the day. So if you can really trigger to those whoa moments, I'm really in love with you, that's the best time to ask for all three: testimonials, NPS,
Right.
referrals, all the things.
All right. The next one on the list is seamless transition from sales to service delivery.
Oh, close to my heart.
Oh, I'm so afraid. I don't know what's going to be number one, but I want to put it two, maybe.
Two.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you have any best practices with that? Like when you're advising your clients on how to have a seamless transition?
Well, I'm going to say this. It seems so simple, but you need to have, and I'm going to go to marketing, right? Marketing, sales, and service delivery to talk to each other. Like at the leadership level, if you have leaders of those different areas, but to really make sure that what we're promising in our marketing, what we promise in our sales is what we're delivering, and vice versa if something changes. So like for me, another term for the work we do is called integrator. And if you're familiar with EOS, and to me, this is exactly why our role is called integrator. It's making sure we are integrating, that everything is working in the same way. And so to have the leadership of each of those be able to do it. That's why when you're really, really, really tiny, like even a solopreneur, you can do this better than a large firm, because you see every step of the process. You're part of it. So you don't want to lose that ability to feel confident that what your marketing promises and what your sales say, yeah, we can put this together, is what you're going to deliver. I have seen it go very badly when what is promised sounds so great and what is delivered is not.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things you said there is, like, obviously with a smaller organization, your leaders pretty much have the opportunity to have that natural connection point. But even these larger organizations, just the best practice of keeping it simple, right? If you're not delivering what you're promising, the likelihood that your client experience is going to be solid is not likely. So I mean, that's still best practice, resonates with a company, massive companies. They have to keep that type of process in their minds.
Yeah, they just have to work harder because they have more people.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we kind of teed up this next one perfectly here. We still got the first spot. We've got the 6 and 7 spots left. Jen, the next one is direct access to firm experts.
Okay. I'm going to go 4. But yeah, this is getting harder. Definitely getting harder. One of the things that I think why I wouldn't put it number 1, because, obviously I'm looking towards the top here with what I got left. One of the things I would say is that if you truly can create a collaborative culture, it doesn't have to be that each client has direct access only to the firm expert, if that makes sense. If you truly work together, we all have different expertise, and so if you have a collaborative culture, you can have access to multiple experts, and I think you can serve the client even better.
Okay, next on the list, consistent, timely follow-up after key interactions.
I love the word consistent. Okay, I'm gonna go 1.
All right.
Oh, there's
I love that.
one.
My project management part is
yeah.
getting
I mean, what did they say? The fortunes and the follow-up? Talk about that in marketing, but it's the entire experience with the
That's
client.
right.
And woo, doggies. Like, one of the things that Amazon Prime has taught us is responsiveness. And in client based experience, while we can't like just say order it and it's on your door in 30 minutes, it's kind of what the overarching culture is expecting of us is extreme responsiveness. So that follow up now is like not an option. It's a necessity.
Just inherently, as somebody who primarily does sales, right? I don't do as much billable work when it comes to the Hinge side of the house. When I hear about things going wrong, it's very common that it's tied to a consistent, timely follow-up where it really wasn't even necessarily an issue, but time passes, emotions, go through thought processes and lead to miscommunication or losing just honestly your hands on a wheel. And you see that across any industry, any honestly service that you're being provided. If you lose track of that one, you're in trouble. So I'm interested to see, because there's some others coming up that might make you worried, Jen, but that's a good number 1 from this salesperson's perspective.
I'm like seeing 6 and 7 left. I'm like, oh, my babies are gonna go to the bottom, and I want them to be top.
Well, let's do the reveal. So you got 2 slots here left, 2 options. The next one on the list is the ability to offer additional services based on evolving client needs.
Okay. So good. Also, really much more effective to sell to existing clients. So I'm gonna have to put it in 6. Like, that's what I got left.
All right.
But I will say I'm okay with it being a little bit lower because sometimes the client experience team can identify it but not sell it well. Like, they need a Joe in their world. So
Oh, thank you.
they at least need to identify it, but they need to partner with someone who can sell it sometimes.
Yeah, honestly, this is shaping up to be a pretty good list. Like, I like your order here.
Now I'm worried. One more.
Oh, well, here, so here's the last option. We can see what we can debrief here on the big list. So in the number 7 spot would be brand experience across all touch points. So that would be number 7. How do we feel about that one being at the lower part of the list?
You know what? To me, just because I want to give myself an out, it feels a lot like 2 in terms of our conversation. Maybe not the same thing, but the intention when we were talking about 2 of having it be the same experience across.
Yeah.
So, maybe it should have been a little higher, but we at least talked about how important it is.
Anything else you'd change on the list in terms of like the blind rankings here? I mean, MB already gave her endorsement.
Oh gosh. You know what? I do think it turned out pretty well. I might move the additional services up a little higher, gotta say. Leaving sales towards the end doesn't make me feel super great, but yeah.
Maybe you just have such a really good marketing team on hand that all these leads are just coming in and it's not as important.
There you go.
Well, speaking of supporting each other, that lends itself to our next category, Jen. Let's talk about a new list, new blind rankings.
Okay.
Let's talk about company culture. Obviously, another key area when you think about, operations of a business, of all sizes, right? Large business, small business, medium-sized business. Company culture is such a key aspect of, what drives performance, what drives, that client experience that we were just talking about. Jen, for you, when you're, as a fractional COO, what are some of the things you look for when you think about company culture and you enter into a new engagement?
So I will say some of the things I look for are what brings them in to me most often. And it's almost like I look for it even in the marketing side of things to just see if there's something aligned with our approach and what they need. And the two major things that I see on the problematic side is that their people aren't taking initiative, like coming up with their own ideas, and they're not accountable. They feel like they can't trust them to do what they promise. So those are the two big things. I haven't been into a company to start with where those things are in place because they wouldn't be calling me. I mean, really,
Yeah.
at the heart of it, if we can't trust our people to do what they're going to do or have them make decisions or problem solve on their own, especially in professional services, we are doomed. So to me, all of the pieces, and I'm sure you'll reveal some things, even though I don't know what they are, but I think that you'll see they all support in some way, shape, or form people being able to do their job well and take some initiative to like, here's what I think might need to be fixed, or here's an opportunity. And when we can get those two pieces together, the culture just starts to fall in place.
All right. Well, let's get to the list. I'm super excited to see where you place these things. Let's start. I'll start with a little bit of an easier one, maybe here. How about flexibility in work arrangements? So, like, are we hybrid? Are we remote? Are we full time in office? In terms of company culture, I know that post pandemic that is a huge conversation right now in the world. How would you rank it in terms of importance?
That's the hard part because I do think it's critical the workforce is asking for it. But in terms of what else could be on my list, I'm going to go 5, and I hope I don't regret that.
All right.
And I will say this. This is one of the things that annoys me is we're talking a little bit about going old school on certain ways of thinking. I don't like being in office because I need to micromanage you and I don't trust you. So it's the why you're in the office. So that's why I kind of like, okay, like we have to have a reason. You can be flexible and hybrid or in the office. If it's just because I'm going to get a little preachy here. I'm too lazy of a leader to actually be a leader and trust you no matter what your environment is. I'm not okay with that. That is a broken culture.
Yeah, I was hearing from I'm trying to be vague here because I don't want to call them out too much, but I was hearing from a family member who works for a large company, and they are pushing to do a back to office type approach. He doesn't live close to the office right now. He travels every couple of weeks to do a day or two. But they're now pushing for, as a part of a corporate rollout, 3-day in office with the intention of potentially going all the way back to 5-day in office. And then you get a certain amount of, quote, flexible days. Best part about this, though, is this individual's boss doesn't live in the state where the office is. Therefore, they won't be there. It's just something that they're pushing the team to have to do.
Yeah. I don't like where this post-pandemic trend is. And I don't know this for sure, but I think I heard something about like Zoom going back in the office. I'm like, really, Zoom? Are you kidding me? And maybe that was just a meme or a joke. But anyway, my point is like everything needs a purpose. Whatever your work arrangement is, have a purpose. So have flexibility in the purpose and in the individual. When the day is done, if you can get more productivity out of an individual because they can have that flexibility, why wouldn't you?
Do you have any advice for companies that are actually largely remote, like how you keep that kind of camaraderie and collective culture?
Well, and that's sometimes the like shiny version of why we need you back in the office, right? Or we're going to lose our culture.
Right.
We have to have the camaraderie. So I'm glad you brought that up. But again, like the undertones, if it's really just like we don't trust you unless we can see that you're working, you know what? They're gonna figure that out and be like,
Yeah.
if I may. So I think the thing is that you have to really understand how humans connect, and yes, I 100% agree. You can connect more in person, but that doesn't have to be every day. I have worked remote for many years. My client, many years, and I want to, like, basically my son's graduating from college, and you can do the math. I started being flexible with it when he was born, but so before it was cool. Let's put it that way. But the thing is that I don't feel not connected to my people. My clients are all remote. When we do have like an annual planning session or something and we come together, absolutely there is more connection. You can't pass that up, but it doesn't have to be every day. You can do other things, but when the day is done, are you listening to what matters to your team and doing your best to honor what matters to them? It's not just a paycheck. It's not just being in person or whatever, or like, hey, we got some cool donuts coming in on Monday, so you should show up. What matters is, do they feel like you care about them, that what they do you see as important and it contributes? So it doesn't matter if you're remote or in person. If you're not doing that piece, they're not connected. The culture isn't strong.
To answer the question of Zoom's remote policy, Gemini has informed me that employees within 50 miles of the office are required to work at least 2 days of the week in the office. And the determining factor, the determining factor is the mileage. And I just have a question: is that as the bird flies, or are we talking like miles where you have to drive?
There's definitely some people out there doing that math. So Jen, next on the list here is related, right? We were kind of just touching on it, but the social events and team building activities. So, I mean, this definitely has overlap with what you were just saying, but how would you rank that in terms of importance?
Just because I'm thinking other things are going to be more important, I'm going to put it in 7. We'll see how it goes. And I kind of already shared that, right? It's what you do in those events that matters, not the events themselves.
Do you have any good examples of like what you've seen work really well?
Yeah, I'll give an example that worked really well that I recently just did. And you can do this hybrid or in person. It was a little bit more vulnerable, but we truly got connected and knew each other very quickly, which was we made a collective playlist. And we put in our like 3 songs that kind of define us. And so that was submitted in advance. Someone else made the playlist. And then when we did the event, we had, as part of it was kind of like, not just name that tune, but name that who was the one that submitted it. And then you had to share like, why, how does this represent you? Now, with a smaller group, the bigger group, it's going to take a long time. But man, did our playlists come out great too.
That's awesome.
I feel like if we did that, all of half the songs for would be like a bunch of emo post-punk songs that Joe and I put in there.
Flat Taylor Swift.
Yeah, that's
there would be tons of Taylor Swift. Yeah, it'd be a big combination of that. Okay, next on the list here, strong onboarding programs for new hires.
I would put it 2.
Ooh.
Seems to be a pretty confident choice to throw that right up there at the top. I'm guessing there's some horror stories of ones that because I'm guessing you don't necessarily come in and you see a bunch of strong onboarding programs. Any horror stories that come to mind on onboarding approaches that you had to kill very quickly?
Basically, it's more that they're non-existent in most companies I walk into versus like really, really bad. The bad is not having one or like thinking it's onboarding. And part of why like the first 90 days in any relationship is really critical, right? You get to start to build habits together and you start to get to know each other. And so we want to, any 90 days of anything, right? That's where you really ingrain habits. So if we don't do it intentionally, we're not clear on what's expected of them. We're not clear on what our culture is. We're not clear on how they fit and how this is all going to work, which is what is lacking in basically every onboarding program I've ever walked into. It starts them off really set up to fail. And then what will happen is oftentimes the blaming of the person, that it's their person versus really if you step back and see is like, did we set them up for success or failure?
Right.
And so much of what I see culturally that doesn't go well is poor communication of expectations. And so an onboarding is really a communication of what do we expect you to do in this job. You have 90 days for us to really train you and support you and guide you and kind of shape you into being super clear on the expectations so that you have the chance to demonstrate you can do it.
So halfway mark here. The next one on the list is clear career paths and opportunities for advancement.
This kind of lives with like flexibility. So I'm going to put it in 6, just again, again, it's both flexibility and career growth plans are super important for our youngest generations in the workforce. Like this is what they look for. But I will tell you, this is what they say they look for, which is why I'm putting it a little bit lower. I go back to with the career growth plans and opportunities for advancement. It's code for tell me I matter and that I'm important, right? So if we could do that, like in strong onboarding programs, like really being clear, like this is your role, this is why it's so important, and keep saying that, and you're doing a great job. Yes, it's important for them to know there's a place to grow into it, but just having them understand that they are growing where they are is more important than like you're getting to the next point, because you also don't want people who are there just for the flexibility or just for the career path. So if you tailor everything around what the newer generation, which my son is one, he is stepping into a professional service firm after college in the fall, and so I know what they're asking, but what he really wants is just to know that I can keep growing. And I don't have to say, okay, I get this title or whatever. They'll ask for it, but what they're really asking for is acknowledgement. You see me, you see that I'm doing a good job and I'm getting better and I'm helping.
You've got some top picks here left, and I think you're going to be happy with yourself here, because in some of the answers here that you've said, you've alluded to some of these things. The next one is a supportive and inclusive team environment.
That's really everything. I want to put it 1. We're going to go 1. We're going 1.
We're going for 1.
You just pitched it for the last like 3 to 4 minutes. So
right? How can I not?
Yeah.
That's everything we've been talking about. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. In terms of some coaching tips on how to promote that type of thing, because I think you see those words supportive, you see inclusive, like that being said, a lot of times you'll also see organizations just use those words on a website and do absolutely nothing else that's going to help that type of person be successful. What are some tips you typically give folks? This is number 1 on how to bring those types of things in.
So I can't stand words on a wall, like you just said, we say this, but we don't do it. Whether it's a website wall or a physical wall, it doesn't really matter. And to that point, it's all about the tone at the top. What is the leadership doing? Are they truly creating an environment that they want? If they just think back about like when I was in the position, because they grew to this position most likely, or even if they were in a different firm and came here and was like, at some point we all had to start, right? And my biggest coaching tip is understand human nature. So a lot of times I think people say, oh, it's culturally different, or maybe it's age different or gender different or whatever. No. We'll get yes and no. Where you can be super effective and kind of have a shortcut is understanding human nature. And so my favorite shortcut is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you can just understand that this is what a human needs, and the best you can to be able to provide some of the things we've been talking about. I see that you are getting mastery. I see that you are, really gifted at this. This is like your purpose. This is what you're good at. You feel part of a culture. We see your needs. We care for you. Feel supported. You feel secure. Like that is your shortcut to human motivation and influence.
Man, we are getting so much like deep insight here. I love this, Jen. Okay, the next one on the list is a clear articulation and consistent reinforcement of core values.
Ooh, it's a good one. Okay, I'm going to go 3. I think people underestimate core values. And like we said, this is oftentimes where you see words on the wall.
Yep.
Core values aren't an exercise you do on a Saturday during a retreat and be like, these words sound great. It's truly like, yes, I've heard people do that.
I'm sure that had to have come from experience, but go ahead.
The exercise I do, if someone doesn't have core values or we really realize they're just not living their core values, the exercise we do is very, very simple and very, very powerful, especially with the leadership team or maybe the whole team if it's a smaller organization, is think about those people that you just love and would love to clone in your organization, right? And what are some of their qualities? What are some of the things when you think of those people? What are those things they sort of have in common? And then you ask the second question, which is think of those people who are like, can we just fire them fast? And like, why are they even here? And think about what is that they have in common, their qualities, the way their behavior, the way they thought, and write the opposite of that. And you're going to see those two lists line up nicely. I haven't had a time where there isn't like, whoa, that's so cool. Look at how they overlap. What you have done as a group, you define what truly fits here. And it's going to be different for every organization. But once you know what is our core, who we are, how we behave, how we work together, it makes a difference for everything in how you hire, how you do performance reviews, how you fire, how you decide everything else. Like based on our core values, are these the right clients for us? Is this the right team member for us? Is this the right social event for us? Is this the right career path for us? It just should be part of your guardrails and making your decisions on what you do as a firm is your core values. That's the power of core values, not just like picking names because you're told you're supposed to have core values.
Is there like a magic number of core values?
That's an excellent question. One of my fun little games I like to play, which is kind of what we're doing here. Ironically, I didn't even think about this. So I like to take a large list and combine them. You can hear me combining them as we go along. Like those two things go together. So I'd rather have a long list. I think I did this retreat in October. And it was like, I think they literally had like 76 things, right? Because we had so many people. And I was able to bring it down to 7, and then I made them pick 5.
Okay.
I like 3 to 5, but what I find is that why I say I like to categorize things is because it gives more of the definition when we start to see what are different versions of sort of the same thing. So I'd say get the whole thing out there and then just look for those commonalities, bring them together. Having your top 3 of anything is very helpful. Because I don't like to go more than 5, but still even then, force yourself to pick your top 3 because it's easy to remember 3 and you can have fun with it too. You can recognize around your core values, but once they're clear and people are truly embodying them and understanding them, it makes it much easier for you all to be rowing in the same way.
And as long as you've done all those things, then we can put them on the wall?
Yes, I will let you.
Okay.
Great question, Joe.
All right. Well, that leaves the last spot here, right? Smack dab in the middle. We have the final option, which was continuous learning and growth ecosystem.
I'm glad that is above the career paths because I think some people think those are the same thing, and I'm also glad it's separate. It is different.
Yeah.
See, this is where I want to combine things. I would say it's a bullet point under that supportive and inclusive team environment, right? Part of supporting that is that we all have a desire to continue to learn and to grow. And so to be able to really understand, especially in fields like we have where expertise is rewarded, you want them to be continuing to learn and grow. And I will say, just because I just said that expertise is rewarded, this should not be limited to technical skill set. Your learning and growth ecosystem needs to be EQ, emotional intelligence, leadership, just all of those things for them truly to grow.
What advice would you give to a business leader who's thinking about starting some sort of professional development program? They're not currently doing anything.
I always like to, you could probably hear this too from the client experience. I like to listen for the complaints first.
Mhm.
So where, in the same kind of vein, where is the team complaints about and what are those themes so that we can do some learning development around that. And I don't just mean about the team. It could be about leadership, right? What is leadership complaining about the team, team about the leadership, about each other? We're going to start to identify where are our weak points. And it can be technical and it can be essentially that emotional intelligence as well. So
Mhm.
I like to always solve at the root cause. So if we can start to see those commonalities, those patterns around what's the culture really just breaking points, then we can build some intentional learning and development around that. You'll get much more from it if you kind of fill in the cracks of what's breaking around us. And then the next learning and development can build on something that's stronger instead of, kind of patchwork quilting, putting these
Mhm.
pieces together without intention.
Yeah, that's great advice.
All right. Well, 2 rounds down. Jen, what was that word you said at the beginning of the episode? You were like scared and excited.
Nearsighted.
Scared, excited. Well, I feel like you're crushing. You're knocking it out of the park here. These rankings seem to
Thank you.
be lining up
Pretty close.
well
Yeah.
with what you kind of felt, at the end of the rounds. Does that hold true for company culture? You feel good about the list?
I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah. And now you set me up to totally tank.
That's
the
right.
next one.
That's right. And not only we're gonna add a little extra flavor to this one because we're running out of time. We want to make sure we can get through everything. How about for this last round 3, business intelligence? Why don't we do a little bit of a lightning round? And
Okay.
we'll get producer John. John, throw in the thunder and lightning for us. Boom, there it was. Okay. At some point, I want the ability to hit the sound button.
You need a soundboard. Right?
I want the soundboard. Okay, Jen. So business intelligence. Why don't we go through these quickly and then kind of round out the list at the end and see what you
Okay.
think? Does that sound good?
Okay.
All
I'll do
right.
my best.
So number 1 on the list here is defining clear, measurable KPIs for all departments.
2.
2 it is for the clear and measurable KPIs. All right, number 2, investing in a robust CRM system.
Okay, I'm surrounded by marketers. I'm gonna put 3.
Thank you for throwing the bone.
That sounds like a biased answer.
Even if I wasn't, but I do know better.
I want to put a pin in that one and come back to it.
Robust is the key word there, but yeah, I agree. Let's keep going.
All right, next on the list is utilizing data analytics to identify growth opportunities.
5.
5. All right.
Oh no.
Next on the list, conducting regular client profitability analysis.
Oh. 1.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All right, hold on. We're going to have to pause the lightning round for a second. I know MB wants to ask a follow-up question on that one.
I'm just wondering like what your thought process is there because I agree with you, but I'm almost like say more.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So one thing we didn't talk about is that career I started out of college, went into was as a CPA. So profitability is really important to me. What I think is a real problem, and it can basically end in a firm or an organization, is not realizing that we're profitable. And so from a service line point of view or from an individual point of view or a type of client, this can make or break a firm. So that's part of why I put it at the top is that at the end of the day, this is the number that pays the bills.
Right.
Paying them.
Exactly right.
All right, we can recommence here with the lightning round. That was but I think that was number 1. We had to kind of pause there for a second. All right. Lightning round is back on. We've got 3 more options here. So Jen, next one is standardizing operational processes.
Oh, you're saying this to us. Okay, 4. We're gonna go 4 because it's the closest to the top.
Number 4 it is. Okay. And then we've got tracking employee utilization and productivity.
I'm afraid of what I'm going to leave for number 7, but we're going to go 6.
We had an entire segment of one of our previous episodes, Jen, on that very topic. I being the person who says I don't really want to fill out a timesheet, and MB, our COO, if you will, telling me why I need to fill out a timesheet.
So, Jen, that leaves for the 7th pick here, conducting post-project reviews to capture lessons learned. All right.
I wouldn't put it a number super in the top. It's super important. It's part of that growth environment, right? That growth culture.
Mm-hmm.
I can live with it being a little bit lower. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey,
so
congratulations for making it through the lightning round there. That was good. We don't like to put the pressure on our guests too much, but you've been handling the pressure all episode. Tell us, kind of wrap this up for us on business intelligence. What do you think of the list? Anything really stand out to you other than what we already talked about with the client profitability?
So I think, overall, I would say this: if you're having trouble with productivity, it's probably this list, right? We can't really be as productive if we don't know what we're doing, what results it's causing. And if we have randomness of people just kind of doing things their own way. So it is, I like to say that profitability is determined by productivity of our team, especially in a service-based business. It's all about our people. So overarching, I think that I might change things a little bit, but the overall message feels really good of we've got to know that what we're doing as a business is causing profitability in our operations, not just kind of fake profitability by throwing in some other numbers, and keep measuring all of the things around that and having systems that keep us knowing what to do with our job, whether it's a process. Yep. I love what you said about that robust, not just a CRM. Robust is a very big difference between what most CRMs I see is it truly using the tools we have around us to make adoption us better.
Well, Jen, we squeezed so many great insights out of that session. You did. I feel like this is a real endorsement for us coming back to this game in the future. I mean, that was really, really well done. We're so grateful that you were able to join us on this episode of Spiraling Up. Where can people learn more about you, get in touch with you? Tell people how they can follow what you're talking about and what kind of ways they can connect with you.
Well, sure. If you want to know more geeky stuff about operations, you can tell I geek out about this. Hamilton COOs is plural.com. That's my website. And I have all kinds of little videos and tricks. If you're okay with this kind of personality, you're going to see it on videos too. Free videos, free training, roundtables where we do come together as peers, all complimentary, because at the end of the day, we got to start by supporting each other.
That's right.
Excellent. Well, for Jen, Joe, myself, Mary-Blanche, thank you to all the listeners who've made it here to the end of the episode. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button. Or if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or any other audio platform, leave us a review. This is still a new podcast, and we are going to continue to find more amazing, intelligent experts like Jen to come on and join us and to have fun so that we can continue to learn and grow together in the space of professional services, branding, marketing, business development, operations. We're talking about it all. That's what we do on Spiraling Up. So thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you, everybody.